I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zayas Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. Welcome everyone to War for the Crown, Part 3 of Question Mark.
Thank you for resubscribing, Elshiro.
Yes. Even though you're only here for the intro, because you don't want to get spoiled on the fact that you are playing at about this point in the story. Let me hand out that juicy XP before you go. Actually, it doesn't matter if you go or not. You'll get the XP. Alright. So, just to remind everybody quickly about the PCs, in case it's been a while since you watched the previous episode. If someone's binging this on YouTube, it'll be easier. But with Twitch, it's usually like weeks to a month before the next stream. So, the PCs that we have in War for the Crown are... oh yeah, that's right. Linda just took up our wiki. That makes it even easier. But we've got Linda's character, Frogry Iron-Temper, who is a dwarf crafter who is all about the artistry of armor, while her sister, Golnader, who works for General Pytharius, is all about practicality. Let's get high-quality weapons to everybody in the army. And the two of them are at odds. It will come up later in this episode, unless we are like the slowest people ever known. Because we're close to the end of part 3, and she meets her sister again in part 4.
It goes really well, doesn't it, Mark?
Oh, it goes swimmingly. Then we also have the two nobles, Eustace Lothede, who's... sort of cousin of the main Lothedes who were in part 2. He is also somewhat descended from the Bettanies and is now taking charge of the Bettany estate.
He doesn't really approve of how the Lothedes do things overall. He's a lot more of a chaotic and free-spirited noble who believes in more democratic ideals.
Yes. Oh, the title for this session isn't correct.
Did it not update? Hold on.
I don't know.
Let me hit update. Did that work?
Did it work now, Joe? So Eustace is a chaotic wizard. We have the other noble, Carla Vinmark, who is a redeemer of Falena, neutral good. So slash bard. But not always during this episode.
That's true.
Because she is a sorcerer at this point.
That's right. She's a sorcerer.
She's always a multi-classed redeemer of Falena, but she changed her main class multiple times. And is an Ulfin from the Vinmark family, which was one of the founding families of the Ulfin Guard. Old Grump agrees that the title is now correct. All right. So then we also have Niv, who is the alchemist, member of the Immaculate Circle, who...
he's nice, friendly friends who he sometimes sends letters to.
Yes, that's right.
And who Eustace spends huge amounts of time trying to investigate, but somehow he just can't seem to find these friends of Niv's. Why is it so difficult?
Eustace never told anybody that he was investigating the Immaculate
Circle
until, anybody. Like, near the end of the game. He just kept saying that he was researching spells, and then half the time he wasn't, and then he just didn't find spells as often as anybody else.
Yeah, and nobody noticed because we weren't paying attention during the time when other players were doing their spell research or whatever. Because he'd just be like, I'm going to try to find spells, and then, you try to do that offline or whatever, and then we don't know
that's right.
what's happening. Mark's
Adventures War for the Crown, Part 3 should be correct for what we're doing right now. Then we also had... John the Marksman.
Who later became... Who still is called John the Marksman on the wiki, because that's what we called him for a while, even though he later retrained. But I think he was still a marksman at this point.
At this point is when he was fighter multi-classed ranger, and he had his bird.
He had his bird friend.
I was very surprised that just having only the basic animal companion from a multi-classed ranger was very survivable and extremely helpful. But it was. I thought that, like, at some of these higher levels when he had the bird and they were going into, like, double digits, that it might be a little fragile with only the very first feat. But it was consistently survivable and able to do some really nice debuffs. Yeah, John had lots of different gimmicks.
Right, this was when he was super... He did a lot of debuff stuff overall.
That was when he did, like, 1 attack per round, but if it hit you, you got slowed and dazzled and bleeding, and if he crit, also stuck into the ground while being slowed, so that you had to remove the arrow, and also... yeah, you had to both remove the arrow and also be slowed, so you had, like, no actions. This was that period of time, which was for a while. That was what he was until he rebuilt again into melee, but also still gimmicky.
Yes.
All right. So then Quingle is our cleric of known cleric of Desna. He is obsessed with Taldan history, and then T is our rogue. She was a peasant that was from County Marat, and whose parents, along with Eustace's parents, were killed by a Sakiel named Ellers, who kind of used to hang out in County Marat. And T is from Tian Sha, not her actual full name, which she like never used, but before like one of the last few sessions, she sent me her character sheet because her character was going to gank someone, and then I saw that, like, oh yeah, her character has, like, this other full name that she never used, and that nobody in the party probably knows.
Well, it was sort of because the player is in a different time zone, and, you know, sometimes she would show up at different times, or she might not be able to come. The meme was, especially after she got, like, legendary stealth, that really solidified it, but the meme was that she, at any time, could be lurking in the shadows, and you wouldn't know until she just popped out to attack someone.
Well, because sometimes she'd just show up in the middle of a fight, but she had the legendary sneak feat, where she's always hiding unless otherwise specified, so I would just have her appear, like, sort of next to an enemy in a backstab position on the next round, whenever she showed up. Be like, yeah, T's been sneaking around this whole time, getting into a good position, and now she's here. That happened a lot. So, anyway, those are the characters. Again, let's remind ourselves where we're at. Part 3 is the part where you go to the city of Yanmas, and it's in big trouble because it has those cannibal, sketchy dreams. It has those bandits who are attacking, and the Taldan phalanx have disappeared and are not helping, which the party later found out, has, by this point, found out that the bandits were actually the treacherous Taldan phalanx, and that they had turned to stone all of the non-treacherous Taldan phalanx.
And by they, you meant friendly Medusa, who was super awesome and not at all suspicious. And Froggy said
they tricked the non-treacherous phalanx to go after a Medusa and get turned to stone.
But she was an awesome and friendly Medusa, and Froggy's opinion that she was awesome and friendly was by no means influenced by the fact that she was Froggy's first fangirl.
Yes, that's true. And then, worst of all, according to the Grand Enumerator of Abadar, was the free healing.
Free healing?
Free healing.
Free healing.
From the cult of the Twilight Child. Which the party just kept not caring about the free healing.
Conspiracy theories? We'll check that
the cult of the Twilight Child. So, my having removed, like, the obvious clues that are just like, it's in the butcher shop, you fools, that are in the adventure normally, and just because I knew the PCs would probably think of this, and they did, of like canvassing the people who had the weird dreams and the appearances of the animals, and then sort of producing a plot of where those were, and using that to create heat maps and figure it out.
Yeah.
Which they then did. And so I would let them do that, and that took some time, and they went to fight the bandits at that point. So when we stopped last time, they were about to go and infiltrate, or not even necessarily infiltrate, but just sort of do a raid on this butcher's shop where they had found out that the dreams were coming from. Right after, because of a lot of crossed wires and issues where the PCs had, like, been dumping dead bodies, but also Yenda Recondance's mercenaries had, like, attacked the Medusa even after the PCs made peace with her, and gotten screwed over and had to run away, and destroyed some of the statues. including a fake statue of the head of the bandits who the PCs had released, and made a fake statue of her, claiming that she got turned to stone.
Yes.
The PCs had agreed that they would have full transparency and tell Yender Mercandus before they did this raid.
Surely telling Yender Mercandus before we did this raid would not cause anyone within the area to be more aware of our presence.
But as I revealed at the end of the last session, this Grey Kingmaker, who was the one who had hired the bandits and set all this up, was Yender Mercandus, Frogry's friend from part 2. And so Yender Mercandus immediately sent a, before the PCs could get there, sent a warning to Soraya, the div, the Pyraka div who ran the Sanguine Brothers butcher shop. And he told her, like, get out, like, they're coming.
Mm-hmm.
And just looking at her morale, looking at her description, I came up with this portrayal of Soraya where she's like, about everything.
Yeah.
She's like, this is so much work, because she has a lot of weird statements about what she's doing in the section. So and like when she will react to what the PCs are doing, and I decided she was just kind of like this random lazy and just
because it takes a while before
div.
She comes out when a lot of stuff is happening in the area.
That is one of the reasons. And so that therefore she just didn't care about the fact that Yender Mercandus told her that people were coming, and it's like, whatever. So, she does have a situation when she'll flee, and she did flee, eventually. But, for that point, she just let her people stay, and she didn't really care. She did put it on, the place on alert.
Yeah.
So,
did that cause some encounters to combine or something?
It's the reason why that some of the people were in more advantageous positions. So the PCs went into like the sort of the fake butcher shop in the front door that I had added to the place so that it wouldn't just be suspiciously like empty and abandoned and everything is evil stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Which I added like in area I-1 right in front of where the building was, just sort of a fake facade for the butcher shop. Yes, David says supreme arrogance. That was also a part of her, like, yes, disdain in general for humanity that sort of fits in with divs. So they went in there and they subdued the fake butcher, and they went, and that's just sort of turning area I-1 into a fake butcher shop. And then they went onto the slaughterhouse floor, but Nazi Nina was completely alerted, so she was sort of messing around with the slaughterhouse machinery trap.
Nazi Nina Pyraka.
She's a Pyraka who's in that area with a slaughterhouse machinery trap. She's one of Soraya's minion divs. So, she uses her chain shape ability to assume the form of a white ram lying amid the machinery, bleeding helplessly. Normally, anyway, but the PCs knew that all these animals were definitely a problem. So, her ruse was not like, I'm a ram who needs your help, but more of a, like, it was obviously someone that they needed to attack.
Yeah.
It still caused the PCs to run into the machinery trap, which I redid as a complex trap.
The question is, did the butcher sell fake meat?
Oh, well, potentially so.
Yes.
It was probably diseased, since Pyrakas like that so much.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a big complex trap, and T, who was there at the time, was like dodging around, deactivating it from different parts while people were fighting against Nazi Nina. And eventually they won. And they managed to win. They were able to also kill the Barghest, as well as the Festering Spirit that is the beginning of War for the Crown's obsessive love affair with the Festering Spirit creature that is significantly overused in this AP, and that I got sick of it by the time that we were done. And I think that in the PF1 version, you would get sick of it even more because it does like con damage. Linda, do you remember the weird ghosty slime thing that just kept charging around the battlefield and trampling people?
Yes, I definitely
How
remember
many
that
times it appeared?
A lot.
Yes.
Well, we got better at the tactics against it.
That's true. Also, you were just higher level compared to it.
That's true. And then it was like, oh, it's this guy again. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyway, there was one of those, and they found Erdman Navin, the junior banker who was charmed along with his father and brought to Soraya's chamber, and they talked to Erdman, who pled for help and had escaped the charm but was very sick. And they managed to not go into the room with the horrible rock grub swarm, but instead, they actually managed to use like divination spells, as well as they basically used divination spells to figure out what was at the top of some of these buildings with like clairvoyance type situation, and eventually they saw the Pyraka Boudoir, where Batu and Marigan are just pretending to be captured people. If they know that the PCs are there, they're even more Pyrakas. And they decided, okay, that's fine. And they went to the room where Soraya was, where she was still just hanging out, toying with Rundle Nevin, the elderly banker, the father.
Did we decide we were going to go rescue the captives later? Or did we think, I forget.
You were like, nah, we don't need to do that yet.
Yeah, because we were looking for the boss.
And you found the boss, and then they sneaked up to there. But since they had not actually killed the other two Pyrakas, those other two Pyrakas quickly
that's right.
came in and joined the fight. So they wound up fighting all three of those Pyrakas, including Soraya, who, unlike in the API made Soraya a buffed up Pyraka who had like some interesting abilities, partially because this AP has no clue what order you're going to do things, but my PCs definitely did the bandits first and were higher level anyway. And then, of course, Charmed Rundle Nevin, the merchant, who somehow he was, like, dodging a lot of attacks, but he was also not really doing anything very useful. And so Soraya was just always like, whenever the PCs did something to her. And eventually she was like, this is pointless. And so she just headed out and fled Yanmas for good to go back to Kadira.
Oh yeah, didn't she like fly out the window or something, and she was really fast, so we were trying to shoot her, and she
flew out the window, but then she flew around but then dropped. And then at that point Eustace tried to figure out where she could have reached with her fly speed, but he didn't check around and then dropped and then dropped down from perspective because he wasn't thinking of the extra movement speed she could get by dropping and arresting her fall.
Yeah.
And so he wound up not finding her quite that round, and she was then able to use 5th level Dimension Door to get a mile away and then just leave because this isn't worth it. And they also then found that in the other tower that was empty, which they had found was empty except for stuff.
Empty except for stuff.
Empty except for stuff. Quingle's new friend, the Banner Relic.
Oh yeah, the Banner Relic. The Banner Relic is awesome.
Yep. Yeah, Quingle liked that Banner Relic. So they had now at this point stopped the sketchy cannibal dreams from happening. They had stopped the bandits, and Soraya may have been just very kind of bored and disdainful of everything, but she had gathered enough information and blackmail herself to try to figure out some pieces about the Grey Kingmaker that when combined with the information they got from the bandit leader, they realized that actually Yender Recondis is the Grey Kingmaker. he of course had immediately fled the city when Soraya was like, nah, not leaving. Worried that he would get caught up in the crossfire, and because of the fact that they kind of alerted him to this before they went into this other place, we did not need to do the mini game where the PCs might do a series of steps to catch him before he leaves. He was just out of there.
Yep.
So at that point, the PCs had entirely saved the city from Yander Mercandus' schemes. I mean, there was still the free healing though, and that weird guy in the red bird mask was not super pleased. But the Baron was able to be healed from his sketchy dreams, and the council was very happy, except the chief enumerator, who said that the free healing was the true danger all along. However, the PCs at this point said, okay, you know what? We watched the services. We're going to go in.
Because we did watch the services early on to try to assess if is that actually Carius, things like that.
That's right. And they thought that it could be, except for that he's too young. They sent in agents, then some of them went in themselves and were recognized by Vadrigan Pole, like the leaders. Like, it looks like the agents of Carius' sister have come to show legitimacy to our wonderful cult. And I made up a because they talk about the song that references a circle, but they're like, the AP gives no information other than that, which is super Chekhov's gunny. It's kind of like they sing a song that references a jackal with 3 eyes, but if you actually sing a song that has a jackal in it, maybe people won't notice it. So yeah, I came up with the circle and Carius song. It was like, from death around to life, the circle is eternal.
Return the child, return the prince,
to heal this wounded land.
Yeah, that's what it was.
And then again, from death around to life,
and they
the
sang
circle
it
is
over and
eternal.
over again. So.
Return the child, return the prince, revere eternity.
Yes.
Because it says to revere the eternity of the circle.
That's what it was. It had the 7.
Yes. Yeah. It has 2 verses, and then they repeat it over again.
Yes.
Yep. The real danger was the friends we made along the way, says Stunt Monkey. So, they decided to go, and they basically, there is a back door to the sort of area that the Cult of the Twilight Child was using as their, oh wait, no there wasn't. There's a side door and a front door, and the party made a back door.
Yes.
Using stone shape. They made
This was one of our early back doors, stone shaped at this point, but
they went into the alley behind the place. If you have the map, it's like sort of almost a semicircle. It's like more than semi, but it's got like a line in the back. The exact center of the exact back, they stone shaped a hole in the wall, and then used an illusory wall to make the regular wall be there.
Wasn't that when we also put like a curtain over it so people couldn't detect the wind patterns?
And a curtain so that they couldn't detect the wind pattern. That's correct.
We also did that.
Which they brought. Then Eustace left one of his diviner's eyes at that area in case people came back to the intersection. So if you know the map, you know that there's like there are 10 areas on this floor. The PCs, just sort of arbitrarily based on their decisions of which ways to go, immediately didn't go to any of those, but instead the stairs going down.
Hi, Kruger.
Hey, Kruger, welcome. So they went down the stairs, and they wound up on the lower floor. At this point, they noticed that there was a golem patrolling, in general, back and forth along the hallway that they were in. They ducked into the first room on the left, which turned out to be a closet, waited until the golem was past them, then moved forward and randomly opened a door on the left that led to L18, where the final boss was. They had at this point not encountered anything else in the entire complex. And they picked a time when Vadrigan Pole and his other priests, aka sorcerers, were all sort of doing their plans for another service. So they just suddenly appeared, and they started fighting these sorcerers, and there was a lot of fireballs coming along, and there were a lot of fireballs and healing. The golem came back, having heard the sounds of the fight, but the alchemist nearly soloed it because of the fact that we had a version of the golems that was not quite final, but almost. And it probably would have been the final version of the golems if we didn't have this encounter, where Logan had already created the idea for the way the elements work, and so the clay golem had the vulnerability to cold. But we had not had Linda's design pass that happened due to needing Linda to do a few design passes, where she said AoE effects and persistent damage did a little bit less damage than the main amount. So the alchemist managed to stick multiple like AoE effects and like every time he missed and did splash damage cold, it did massive damage anyway because it was like one cold damage. Okay, that does the same amount.
3d12 plus 1 or something like that.
Yeah, it does 4d12. It's like, and then he had a clinging bomb, so the persistent damage also turned into 4d12. Yeah. And the golem, the rogue came out there to help him, but barely needed to do anything because he had just like wrecked a golem that was 2 levels higher than him.
Our tendency to our fortune / misfortune of quickly finding bosses randomly, it in some ways advantages at us, but in other ways it tends to lead us to having encounters that are pretty ridiculous. Also,
they're about to so if you guys know, and even if you don't, there's a subsystem at the end of the AP to determine how Eutropia rules at the end as an empress. Is she compassionate? She always wants to help the common folk. If she's compassionate, she does it with bleeding heart policies of like, everyone, you're accepted back, even if you're vipers to my bosom. And oh no, there are lots of conspiracies against me, but I'm so nice to everyone and friendly, and everyone likes me. And then there's like on the flip side is the ruthlessly efficient, where the PCs murdered everyone, where it's like, well, I want the peasants to do well, so I'm going to kill executing everyone who was against me in the war for the crown, and if there seems to be noble conspiracies, I will execute them regardless of their station, until all that is left is people who are smiling because they're either happy for my good public works or they're worried I will execute them. So the PCs got every compassion point in the entire AP except for one that's in here, because of the fact that they missed saving someone from prison because of the fact that they went directly to this boss fight, wiped out the cult, and then just went to the temple and told the temple you could sweep up the rest. And the temple swept up that person. But anyway, so yeah, the alchemist and a little help from the rogue, but not really, defeated that golem. Meanwhile, the rest of everyone was having trouble with just how many fireballs were happening all around the area hitting them. And Frogry was like, I think there was, Vadrigan was sort of an occult.
Did it have fireballs?
Vadrigan was an occult sorcerer. He was trying to dominate. He failed, which was lucky, the boss. Also, the party was really putting pressure on him. His 3 minions that had fireball meant that Frogry was getting hit by 4 fireballs.
Yes.
Not from the boss. He was a cult sorcerer. But because Eustace always throws them on Frogry.
Yep. This was around the time. Well, certainly I tend to ask for this energy fire.
Stuntling says their Eutropia rules by somehow immediately fighting the leaders of any group opposing her and murdering them. Somehow is the PCs.
Somehow is the PCs, yes.
Come on, because she becomes the murder Eutropia because the PCs were murdering, and they could presumably continue being the ones who murdered for her in the evil but still likes the common folk Eutropia version. Eutropia the Bloody, I think is her epithet.
But we got the friendly Eutropia.
They were so far from, because if you're within 3 points, then you got a balanced Eutropia. They had 14 points for friendly, 4 points for like practical and level-headed, which they got automatically by just like, did you work with the Pathfinders who said, hey, we'll work with you? Yes. Okay, you got a point.
Yeah.
And then 1 point for efficiency in part 4, which we'll see. But basically, there are these evil spy groups that are mostly fiends. And if instead of killing the fiends, you co-opt them into murdering less fiendish people who are mostly not evil, for some reason that is not efficient. and being, if that is not the bloody murder one, and the bloody murder one is killing those fiends.
Yes.
Rather than convincing the fiends to murder neutral people for you so that everything is, and not to attack you because they think you're on your side so that everything is a little weaker for you when you come in. Which seems wrong, but that was the one point of efficiency that PCs gained, is that they did not have fiends murder non-fiends. Eustace would have liked it, because one of the people who would have gotten murdered was a wizard whose spellbook they didn't get. Anyway, they managed to defeat this boss fight without too much trouble, considering that they added a golem to 3 pretty high-level sorcerers, and also the main boss, who was a mesmerist with Dominate. And by mesmerist, I mean occult sorcerer. Is how I did it for him. So, yeah, at that point, they just had the Temple of Abadar handle the rest, because...
Didn't we see the...
Oh, wait, no, there's one other thing that happened, because they found Carius back there, as well as some of Panavar's old books that they, Vadrigan Paul had taken, and they figured out it was continually trying to research Infinite Loop's immortality and exploits, and figured out that Vadrigan Paul was trying to create a situation where, just like a lot of people in Golarion, like, secretly do secret demon stuff with their rituals, he was secretly doing secret angel stuff, where the reason he created this cult of charity and goodness was everyone's goodwill and good wishes would get, like, pulled into a circle, and then just strengthen the angel part of him until he eventually became a full angel. Which is, like, less evil than it seems, I guess, but he just wanted to become immortal that way.
So, I know we had no idea about the Immaculate Circle or anything other than Niv, but did Niv, at this point when he saw these things, did Niv know that Pol was part of the circle?
No.
Okay.
Niv did not know that Pol was part of the circle. Not for sure, although he suspected... I told him that he knew that there's someone who went by P in Immaculate Circle who had similar theories to this.
Yeah.
But who's not, like, in the inner circle, just some rando. They also found Prince Carius, who, they took Prince Carius out, and on the way back, because I'm kind, and I felt that they probably didn't want to miss one of the relics, Carius was just noticing the evil presence from the Denizen of Lang in the Denizen of Lang room, so they decided to go fight that guy. He would have definitely left if Abadar Priest was storming in.
Yeah.
And they decided to kill the Denizen of Lang and not take his ruby, his 1,000 gold piece ruby. And sure enough, they got the Scion's dagger, which was actually very important for when they got themselves into another big boss fight by accident later on.
Yes.
So it's good that they had it. And then they headed back into the back alley where they were confronted by their red bird masked friend Zan, who said, "It's the abomination!" He'd been yelling about abominations before.
Yeah.
He's like, "It's the abomination," and he wanted them to hand over Carius. They refused. So he turned into his true form, a super Vanth Psychopomp named Zan with whirlwind scythe attacks and lots of powerful abilities. Fortunately, Carius helped out using his Spirit Surge abilities from having lots of different... Some Monkey says, hinting about the Immaculate Circle to the players early on seems like one of the biggest things to change. It really sort of comes out of nowhere, otherwise, despite having been present in all the books. There actually are hints of the Immaculate Circle
starting with the rat.
Even the mouse was a member of the Circle, was trying to do immortal things. The fact that they had a member who was trying to research those
that made it really obvious.
But the mouse had things like the circle that he was drawing all over the place. But just the fact the use of the shape circle doesn't necessarily make it obvious. I don't think anybody recognized the number of times circles were mentioned being all about the Immaculate Circle.
It was more like all the immortality stuff, because it was like, oh, this is immortality research like Niv likes.
Yep.
That was more salient because we had a PC who was specifically looking for that. And he wasn't like, oh, it's circles again, because he...
Yep.
Isn't gonna.
Fortunately, Carius was able to use spirit surges and medium abilities from all 6 spirits to help the PCs, and mostly help himself not be killed. They used a bunch of like Glimpse of Redemption and Shield Warden to block for Carius because like he's out there. There's no reason Zan couldn't kill Carius, and I didn't want to give Carius like lots of extra hit points that he wouldn't have, so I gave him a reasonable number of hit points, and the PCs managed to keep that reasonable number of hit points from being destroyed, despite Zan's whirlwind attack, partially because John's arrow prevents whirlwind attack because it was the 2-action shoot and be slowed for 1 round.
So that was a really interesting fight where like the big pressure of that fight wasn't so much defeat this guy, but it was, oh gosh, we have to keep Carius alive. He clearly wants to kill Carius. Let's put all our resources into keeping him safe.
That's right. And they defeated Zan and banished him back to the Boneyard. He's like, no, you fools, the abomination! And later on, Eustace would say, oh, that bird guy was just right. We should have listened to him.
Yes.
But not yet. So they managed to, like, anger the somewhat. According to the adventure, if the PCs themselves don't release the Lion Blade Cassandra Florent from the Encircling Bower, then she gets really mad at them and just doesn't like them throughout the rest of the AP. So they managed to do that.
Yeah.
They did send the Priest of Abadar who got her out. But they didn't.
Yes.
But at that point, they had saved Yanmas, and Frogry and Arspina had their art show, and they brought Carius back to Eutropia and completed Book 3. This led them into their next mission in the City of the Lion's Eye, where they had to head to Zimar and deal with Pytharius once and for all. And we will move on to that.
Again, Adventure Path Part 4.
Let's see. Ooh, it's not in my recent files.
Uh-oh. You're going to have to go into one
I'm
of
going
the
to
other
actually
downloads.
have to go into the downloads to open it.
Yes.
No. More clicks. So, by the time City of the Lion's Eye had started, if you look at the map of who's around, Vort is just still there in his same area that has never changed. And also, of course, Marcus Starborn, who is just the gnome who has support of gnomes in the middle of the woods. Nazezi is being crushed between 2 giant Eutropia support areas now that Yanmas is all Eutropia. And then Pytharius has taken control of everything down in the south. So there's really not that much of a war for the crown going anymore compared to before. Of course, that might not be true for long.
Yes.
So the PCs at this point are, they've reached 10th level, and Martella was sending them out to Zimar. But first, they needed to get some Lion Blade trading so that they could infiltrate infiltrate Zimar. So they went back and they met again with Cathanzalar, who had helped let them in at, and also Lucia Linda's character, who had also helped let them in Book 1 to the Senate. And
one of my Pathfinder Society characters.
Pathfinder Society characters, not her PC. And then also Casaranda Florent, who was just, it says here, if they left her behind in their efforts, she is cold and critical, insisting to Catan that Eutropia's chosen agents are an arrogant, selfish pack of jackals and not to be trusted. Which, there you go. Yeah.
So we were kind of just like, what's
I would have almost expected that wording in Book 5, but instead it was here. So that is what she said about them because of the fact that they left her behind to die. And by die, I mean be saved by the Priest of Abadar.
Yes.
So the PCs went through a training montage, and I actually played, like, a bunch of training montage music during the training montage as they went and rolled their skill checks for the different types of training. Like, all the classic ones.
Yes. It was fun.
Yep. And it's the eye of the tiger.
Yep.
All that. So, Stump Monkey is stealing that. So we did actual training montage music as the PCs attempted different checks to focus on training all of the different areas that the Lion Blades cared about. And then the final challenge...
And that also allowed us to qualify for the Lion Blade Architect.
Which was... Linda took at this point. At this point, by the time we were in book 4, I think we were about at the point in time where the book had been released. I think it maybe hadn't been released yet, but it was finalized. But, of course, Lost Omens World Guide was not out yet.
Yes.
But Linda, nevertheless, played Lion Blade because I was the design lead on Lost Omens World Guide, so we could test that too.
Yep.
And everyone was welcome to take it.
Our group, our home group where we do these testing, everybody is under an NDA.
Yep. That way, if I want to test something, I can some kind of rules element from somewhere, I can throw it in and see how it goes. Yep. They're also like some of the people in the Starfighter playtest, which was a very limited playtest. Which I think we mentioned before. So, yeah, they did the training montage. They did the final challenge where they put on the masks and they see the 4 guards, and then it malfunctions, quote unquote. And the malfunctioning was that a Crag Linorm appears.
Whoops.
And Niv the Alchemist just, like, sort of took off his mask and then was not able to be attacked by these illusory Linarm. But some people stayed in there for a little while until eventually they were convinced to just get the heck out of there. Which is a success. It is a success because they're supposed to not just stay in there and fight the Linarm arbitrarily. Also, oh yeah, I forgot about the fact that she put in, like, the truth-taking tea on people again, and it was poison. Well, it was poisoned with the truth serum, just like every other time.
Every tea we were offered in this entire AP was poisoned with something.
Froggy drank it again.
Yeah. Well, she didn't think that the Lion Blades were gonna poison them.
Yeah, well, it wasn't poison; it was truth serum.
Yeah, well, she wasn't gonna lie to them anyway.
All right. Well, it was funny.
It was funny. You're like, roll a fortitude save it. I was like, God damn.
Yep. So, after they finished the final challenge, they were able to become Lion Blades, and they were going to infiltrate Zimar.
Somebody says the AP does a disservice to T, bringing down its reputation.
That's
Not
right.
nearly as much of a disservice as it does to halflings.
Halflings and T.
Yes.
I mean, but the character T did great.
The character T was awesome.
But
badass.
T itself is always poison.
Yes.
And halflings are always assassins. We now know this. So, once they become Lion Blades, they learned about the infiltration plan, what happened to the Lion Blades, which was that basically the spy master of Pytharius, Mylon Jeroth, was just way too badass, and he's been known to work with the Lion Blades in the past against Kadira, but this time it must have been him, simultaneously set up a purged all of the Lion Blades except for Gnaeus, who is still alive based on divinations, but can't respond, which is ominous, but he is paranoid, so he may have just been refusing to respond because he's worried about getting caught. And so the PCs need to get into Zimar, and figure out what's going on, and deal with these issues from Jeroth, and also that there, according to Cathan, there's also Dame Avena, who studied at the Magambia, who is the High Diviner. There's a Major Domo, who's pretty powerful, an Abadar cult that's like super ridiculously, if you are poor, that means you're a bad person. And you deserve it. If you're rich, that means you're a good person. And you deserve it. Like sketchy Vault and Chain Abadar sect. And so then the PCs were going to take...
Very punchable.
Yep. Super punchable. You guys actually didn't wind up attacking the chapel with those guys in it, so you didn't have to fight like the leader of that. because of the way that you guys did the Pytharius thing at the end, which was also very, very this group. So they had to take they had to go get some false identities from the false identity expert, and then infiltrate into Zimar, because Zimar has papers due to Kadiran's infiltrations.
The Lion Blade ability to not take any penalties for disguising as a male human while being a female dwarf was super useful.
It was very useful.
Especially because it's like, my sister would definitely recognize me, so I need to...
Yep. So they had to get some identities to get in, because there have been Kadiran infiltration. In fact, this is so much on the border and has passed back and forth between Kadiran and Taldenhead so many times that there's just like... There are so many ways that security had been breached, both in the city and in the fort, that lots of precautions were up there. This is one of the better defended against, the fort itself, especially, that is where Pytharius lives, is one of the better defended against usual PC tactics of overall forts that I see in APs, many of which are just, like, not defended against anything. This one was pretty defended.
Yeah.
But they have papers that you have to check, and they needed false paperwork. So they headed to the town of Panamona, where they met with the smuggler Syracuse, and they got their false identities, although, of course, the inspection came in, and the PCs managed to help save Syracuse, so he gave them some costumes for free. And they picked which identities they were going to take, and they wound up with, I added a bunch of extra ones to the list of possibilities, such as
because we had 7 PCs.
Yeah, and there were only 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 possibilities, and it said to add more if you had more PCs. So I added, like, a, what was the name of the type of gnome that's, like, more gloomy?
Whisper?
No, not Whisper. That's from Eberron. It's the, not Umbral, is it? No, it's something else. Fell, a fell gnome. Like,
that's what it is.
A fell gnome goth poet, female gnome, who Quingle was disguised as.
It was funny. It was funny to have the cheerful and chipper cleric of Desna be like be a goth poet.
Yep. And we had the traveling singer from Opara, female half elf. I think was Niv, the male half elf, and Frogry wound up being.
I'm pretty sure it was a male human.
Yeah.
Was I that knight? No. What was I?
Maybe it was one of the new ones. Were you the farmer? You may have been a fisherman.
Oh no, I was definitely someone who works at the dock.
Yeah, you were like a dock worker or fisherman that I added.
Yeah.
And then Zenobius Bakar, the knight from Lion Guard, was
either I was the fisher person or the fisherman, or because I was a male character in that case, or somebody else was, and the other one of us was a dock worker, because we definitely tried to explore things together at the docks.
Yep, and Eustace was the knight, and Carla was the merchant. Which is relevant because the merchant has an extra thing going on. Which is, the merchant is the one who has a wagon that, like, the people at the checkpoint had checked because she had not paid the dues. So, they made it past, they got to the city gate. They were able to pass their inspection thanks to Follow the Expert, because John was not going to take any intelligence or charisma-based skills.
Now, it took some doing for him to avoid all the intelligence and charisma-based skills.
Yep, but I think he, even at the end of the game, had one.
Yeah.
We found out. But for a while, he didn't. And, they were able to answer all the follow-up questions and make all of their checks and get in, at which point Cadonia was stopped because of the fact that she had a wagon full of trade goods that were needed to be paid with storage fees, so the PCs easily paid the fine, and they got a wagon with all of these items, including that piercing good weapon, the +1 holy spear.
It was definitely worth a lot of money. I know that Carla felt a little bad and was like, oh, well, we should probably use these for now, but then when we find this actual merchant, we should be sure to pay them back.
And they made it in at this point, and also at this point, they headed to Samurai Spice Importers, which was the safe house. Found that Gnaeus wasn't there, but the message from him that was actually from, well, you'll see. If you and Kay are friends, meet me at her favorite place in 2 hours, G. So the PCs, suspiciously, they used their Wand of Sending, which now worked once per day, every day, to contact Catan, figure out that the place to go was Honey Kunife, which is a coffee house. And they headed to Honey Kunife. They did so carefully in case this was a trap. But they found Gnaeus was there. And
so that meant it was definitely not a trap, because we saw Gnaeus and we recognized
They found Gnaeus, but he could have, like, turned the tables and joined the enemy or something like that. They're still
yeah, and
suspicious.
we were still on edge, but, like, clearly, I'm just making a joke, because it obviously wasn't Gnaeus.
Yeah, so...
later on. But
was it?
it wasn't obvious to us, but...
They found Gnaeus, and they started talking to him, and they realized that, like, he was trapped in here, and there are other issues, and they identified themselves, and they claimed that they were going to get him another identity to get out of the city, and he didn't believe them, but they showed him their fake identities, and they said, okay, yeah, you probably can. And they kind of revealed everything that they knew from the Lion Blades to him. And he was saying that, gave them some information like Mylon Jareth is the greatest. He's impossible to beat. His minions are kind of crappy, though. They're very ineffective. And he also had some coffee that he poured for everyone, including himself, that he gave to everybody. And he was also drinking it too.
Which clearly meant this hot beverage was definitely not poisoned.
But it was. And so Frogby was poisoned again.
See, it wasn't just tea. It was also coffee. Hot beverages in general in this AP, man.
Yep. So, eventually after he had all the information from them, he decided that it was time to reveal himself as Mylon Jareth, the ninja spy master. He made shadow clones of himself that were partially real. And
to this point, he gathered all the information he could.
Because he's usually a solo, and obviously nothing else was here. So I didn't want the PCs to fight something that was one creature that was inappropriate. And this is like a severe encounter, because he's the final... He's like one of the final guys who just shows up at the beginning. So I didn't want him to fight something that was so hard that he alone had to make up all of the XP against 7 characters. So I gave him shadow clones that were weaker versions of himself that would fill out the rest of the encounter. And so they fought Mylon and his shadow clones. It was very rough, and they had some issues. He gave, like, these weird visions that gave penalties to most people, but bonuses to Niv. He was trying to tell the PCs, like, I don't want to have to kill you. My minions are crappy. You guys are pretty good. Why don't you join me? We could work together well. It's like, Niv, I don't see why you're working with them.
And we're like, why is he talking to Niv? This is really weird. And Niv's like, meh. We asked Niv, and Niv refused to answer.
I think Niv didn't know that this guy was actually one of the inner circle of the Immaculate Circle.
Okay. Well, that's why I'm kind of asking when curious about what Niv actually knew.
He didn't know that Mylon was in the inner circle. So they fought Mylon. It was close. Like, PCs were low, but Mylon was probably going to lose. So he did a shadow clone split and fled out. Or no, he was going to leave cleanly, but then he realized he had left behind his papers on the table when he was starting fighting the PCs. So he did a shadow clone fork where he split into 2, one of whom started grabbing the papers and running one way, and the other ran the other way. And the PCs realized, they were like, probably the real one is the one who ran without the papers, because of the fact
that one's much more likely to escape. But
they still knew that they might not be able to take him down before. They might get neither of them if they went after the real one, so they decided to go after the papers anyway.
Yeah, because then that we'd be able to get information.
And then sent everyone instead of splitting the party. Because he seemed to want to try to get them to split the party, maybe kill half the party.
Well, it was clear that he was putting some significant effort to try to get us to not have these papers, which meant we wanted these papers.
And they did, because it had all... it was very, very encoded, but had all the information about all of his agents in the city, including their current passwords. So, once the PCs decoded that, the papers, that he was just become so cocky at this point that he had out, because no one could stop him. He had been changing names every generation to different Jeroths and pretending to be them, but he just went back to his original name and appearance because nobody cared or noticed of Mylon. So, anyway, Mylon's portfolio was very, very helpful to the PCs. This is the point where they can use the portfolio to pretend to be Mylon and try to get these horrible fiends that are in a lot of these groups or evil assassin cult to murder neutral people that work for Pytharius. But they decided not to do that. So that made them less evil, according to the AP. That made them more evil. My apologies. That made them more evil, according to the PC, to the AP. But they knew that the 3 places they need to go were Waterhill Manor, where Jeroth's loyalists were. They knew that that was one of the 3 places. Then there was also the Sweet Dreams Tea Shop, where the Sisters of Indulgent Dreams were.
You mean the ones who were definitely divs?
Yeah, they're totally divs. Linda found out last night that they weren't divs.
We thought they were divs.
Anyway, but...
that's what you get when you critically fail a knowledge check.
I'm sure that the player of Eustace knew what they were, and because he kept asking other people to roll knowledge checks, they're like, no, that's fine, we got enough information.
Well,
Anyway, and then the 7 forms of Sin Monastery, where assassin monks were. So they decided to do a nightly raid on the Sweet Dreams Tea Shop, and it was one of those times Linda was like at a convention or something, because one of the only sessions she missed of War for the Crown was the raid on the Sweet Dreams Tea Shop. Maybe the only session.
Yeah.
Because we've also just not had it sometimes because multiple people couldn't come when Linda was at a convention. So they went into the tea shop in the middle of the night from behind, and they wound up stumbling into the stables with a nightmare, and were fighting the nightmare. And then, like, this young tween/teen comes over. It's like, what's going on? And at this point, like, Eustace just starts attacking her. Is just very convinced that she's definitely evil, and is the people are like, what are you doing, Eustace? Like, she survived my first attack. She's definitely not just some girl. And then he used true seeing and recognized that she was some kind of horrific creature, which he identified as a div with his recall knowledge. And then she sort of like ran around out of the room into another room and closed the door. And Eustace is like, that's a lot of actions, isn't it? So he disintegrated the wall between the room with the nightmare that they're fighting.
I may not have been there, but I definitely saw this Eustace strategy disintegrate.
And you were also came in when they were searching that place the next time with the disintegrated wall between. Now, I'm not sure. I think they found out later there was a trap that was on that door that they didn't have to do. But with the wall disintegrated, they just had a straight shot to shoot her down without having to go out, go around, open the door, etc. And take a U. It was very close, and they managed to kill Estella, the young tea person, who was actually a div, by which I mean a night hag, which they never found out. They did get the div's div necklace that gave bonuses for a while. And found a whole bunch of like weird, sketchy stuff, including references to I think like the astral plane, or a lot of very weird things going on in this tea shop. But they took out the tea shop with very little fuss. And at that point, oh yeah, they also found false flag operations framing Kadira. And they sent information to Cathan, who said, excellent find, though divs may not be our most reliable witnesses, still, you're doing excellent work. So at that point, the PCs decided that, and Linda was back, and they decided that same day, they're going to raid the 7 forms of Sin Monastery before Yes, more anti-T propaganda teas made by night hags. Before the passcodes could change, before Jareth could warn any of these people, because they went and attacked like almost like they rested and preparations like in the middle of a weird time during the night and immediately attacked, and then they attacked the Seven Forms of Sin Monastery in the sewers. So the Seven Forms of Sin Monastery definitely has the creatures that have like almost the most possible assassins in the name of their short stat block name. If they were Red Mantis assassins, they maybe would have more, because they are afflicted were assassin bug assassins. So if they also had Red Mantis assassin, that would be the maximum number of assassins that.
So they are were assassin bugs.
Yeah, were assassin bug assassins.
And then their class is assassin.
Yep. But that's not that's like the first encounter, one of the first ones that's listed, but that's not exactly how the PCs dealt with this place. So what they did was they ran into a slime naga and an ooze, which is also not a unique encounter for this AP. But when it became clear how strong the PCs were, the slime naga was like, fine, whatever, you could go in my area and just don't take my treasure. And the slime naga just left with her treasure. Because of the fact that she's been serving as a spy and occasional drug dealer for the monks in exchange for their protection, but clearly she was not going to be protected dying for them and would rather be a turncoat if the PCs attempt to parlay with her. It also said she might try to trick the PCs to come towards her black pudding, but at this point it was clear the PCs were too strong, so she instead just decided to leave and get away with her stuff. The PCs found the secret passage that was in there, and it led them immediately to the back room where the boss of the monastery was. And she was Quan Dismal.
Well, this was at least an instance of us finding the back room because of a secret door, rather than just randomly stumbling into the boss and the giant encounters everything else at it.
Quan Dismal, the elven monk. And they managed to get into a fight with her that alerted, like, almost the entire rest of the complex as, like, waves of monks were streaming in. But they all had a morale of, like, they fight to the death, and they're not really afraid of much. But when Eustace caused Quan Dismal to critically fail her save against a Disintegrate, which killed her, like, on the second round. It looks like Stephen Glicker just got here. You can watch the replay, Steven.
He asked us just jokingly to start over.
Yep.
It'll be up on Twitch for another couple of weeks.
So Quan Dismal was disintegrated, and I decided that at that point, like, one of those monks, the one who was left in the first fight, which was her and some monks, just started screaming and running away. And this is really alerted even more of the people that something was going on. He's like, get out! And then they all were making fun of that one. He's like, we're supposed to fight to the death. Why are you running away? Yeah, you don't understand. She's just motes of dust. She's drifting through the air. And so, there was just this big fight in the long hallway that connects the monastery. As all the monks streamed out from different rooms and came in, T showed up for the session, and we had her come in as if she was infiltrating the other side, attacking one of the people there. John managed to just pin monks to the ground with that slow shot critical hit on the bow combo I told you guys about, where they lose 2 actions, getting the arrow out and being slowed, and so they could barely do anything. And they managed to just fight the entire rest of the monastery at the same time and win. Plus, that monk got made fun of. So Stump Monkey says that they missed a lot of the anti-T propaganda.
And then I said in the chat that it's not our fault that every hot beverage in this AP is poisoned.
That's right. So they defeated them, and they found the almost completely burned letter from Pytharius. And so an interesting thing about Pytharius is, despite everything that's going on, Pytharius, what makes him interesting is he's lawful neutral. Hey Kruger, thanks for thanking us for helping the community.
It's a lot of fun to do.
It is very fun, and It's gratifying when people are happy.
We would not do this 2 to 3 times a week if we weren't having a good time.
That's true. So there's the burning letter. What's interesting about Pythagoras, he's lawful neutral. Like, he has his plans, he has his ideas, but he wants Taldor to not be destroyed by Kadira, and he thinks that ultimately Eutropia would be ruinous for the country.
Thanks for the sub, Scout Monkey.
Thanks so much. So I didn't really have to change the AP much to make sure that he was definitely lawful neutral, but like I changed a little tiny bit of the wording in his letter that was burning, like barely. But there was just one thing in there that was like, why would he even write that? I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was almost exactly the same, including the point where he was ordering them to murder Eutropia and blame it on the party.
Yes.
Which most PCs would just be like, this guy has to die now because he wanted to blame things on us. And the PCs actually were like, no, it's pretty reasonable that he's executing her and blaming it on us. Like, that's a reasonable setup.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's probably what he would do.
Yeah.
And but they did find that letter, which was still something that they could use as evidence against Pythagoras. And the Lion Blades, and I hadn't mentioned this before, but they are a sort of a neutral group. They didn't take sides in the War for the Crown. They're like, like the CIA of Taldor. They don't want to be seen as kingmakers. But, so they're not going to act unless there's clear evidence that Pythagoras is doing serious problems for the country itself. Anyway, having defeated the 7 forms of sin, they also followed the monk who had just run away screaming, and they found that a secret entrance that led into the bottom of Waterhill Manor, and decided not to do that today because they had done a lot, and there was a lot.
Everything else was
fighting the entire monastery at the same time was plenty. So they knew it was giving Mylon a little bit of time to recover, but they did their preparations for the next day of going after Waterhill Manor. So, have a great weekend, Joe. Enjoy your Starfinder. So they headed up into Waterhill Manor, and by headed up into, I mean they used divinations and other techniques to sort of spy on Waterhill. They tried to already seen whatever could have been seen without just by looking through the windows, by sending some of their agents to look at Waterhill Manor and scout out some of these places for them previously while they were resting. And actually, wait, I think before they went to Waterhill, they actually went to the Court of Filth.
Yes, we did.
That's right. So before they did that,
bow down into the sewer
they bowed down into the effluent, into the
in order to get information from this Odia
into
guy.
the water full of poo, to show their obeisance to Golrish, the great king of the Otiugs. And they prostrated themselves, and they got him a crocodile, and they gave him some kind of a tribute. And they gave him some tribute and a giant crocodile, and in exchange, he gave them some juicy information, which included the story of one, what was their name? Something Tam. Something Tamalar, Tay Amelon. Tay Amelon, that's right.
Tay Amelon, there we go.
The story of Tay Amelon, the tutor of Pythagoras, who had been killed by Pythagoras' father, as well as the dagger that did the deed. So the PCs were very happy to have that. They found out, the reason they knew they had to give a lot to Golrish is that Mylon Jareth was trying to get this dagger. And so there was a bidding war. But the PCs did that, and they also the main thing they did was that they traded this, I think, the secret of Panavar, the 6th being all of the Panavars as well, which was juicy gossip and information.
I didn't think they gave him,
because it was an equally damning secret. They did that and a crocodile, a giant crocodile. Maybe. Oh yeah, he also likes fine food and wine, so I think you also gave him alcohol. But it was not nearly up to his standards of like thousands of gold worth of stuff because there's a combination of things.
Yes, but it was also at the meme at this point of how many times we had used alcohol to help us get stuff that was more valuable than the alcohol we spent.
Stop Monkey is right. Crocodile is a good bribe. It's specifically on the list of bribes that he likes. At this point, the PCs had the dagger, and they were able to find out about Tay Amelon, and they wanted to find out more, but they were going to have to find Tay Amelon's body first to do a little bit more studies, and they weren't sure where that was going to be. Anyway, they went to Waterhill Manor, and they basically scouted around, then used climbing magic to get up onto the balcony on the upper floor of the manor. And from there, they attacked into the master bedchamber, where Mylon Jerath was there sort of doing his paperwork, but he had also brought in a lot of his bodyguards just in case, and they wound up fighting like almost all of Waterhill Manor at the same time again. So it was Mylon Jerath,
giant.
but now the PCs were higher level from fighting him and all those other places, so they were a level higher, maybe even 2 levels higher by this point.
I think we were 2 levels higher by this point
because of the Golrish plot XP.
Yeah.
But there was Jerath, and then there were his maids who did the ridiculous, colorful things, who were Mirai Rakshasas, and his guards who were Raja Rakshasas, and his butler, who is a Dandasuka bard, who was disguised as a halfling. So they fought...
Stupid. Halfling butler.
Yeah, they fought all of those at the same time, and they managed to chase off Mylon Jerath. The butler escaped. They killed all of the rest of them. And I also slightly tweaked the 2 different Raja Rakshasa spells. So one had Lightning Bolt, but the other one had Fireball, and they were in a sort of a rivalry about whether Lightning Bolt or Fireball was better. The one who liked to cook had Fireball. I was like, Fireball can also help cook your food. And the PCs played on that with Chain Lightning and other things that they were doing. And also Fireballs. And they...
See, that was a really good Fireball. Oh, that was a Chain Lightning. Oh, you don't have Chain Lightning. It's a stronger version, etc., etc.
Ooh, it looks like Kruger, who's in the chat, has a group that can play multiple days in a row this week.
And they're going to be exploring Citadel.
So that's Age of Ashes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So they beat that giant fight, and they managed to go downstairs, and they found the secret way, or they found the real Gnaeus, who was convinced that this was just the Mylon Jerath and his Rakshasas pretending to be the PCs.
Mm-hmm. We eventually convinced him we were actually rescuing him.
Yep. And they helped him escape. And they went down into the basement where they found the pet snake, the cute snake of Mylon Jerath that was down there. And
we didn't kill
an
that.
Advanced giant anaconda. You did not kill it.
I think we went past that.
I think you used calm emotions on it or something and made it stop fighting. And then also I think Eustace was disguised as Mylon Jerath a lot of this time. Mm-hmm. Which was very interesting when they met Gnaeus, because Gnaeus assumes that the PCs are Jerath disguised as him, but Eustace was actually disguised as Jerath when he went into that room anyway. And the other people were the PCs. So Gnaeus is like, this is the worst disguise ever. You should have all been disguised as Eutropia's agents, not one of you being obviously Mylon Jerath.
And then we tried to
and the rest of you disguised as Eutropia's agents. This is so bad quality.
So then we used that as yes, well, we would not, if we were actually Mylon Jerath, we wouldn't have one of us who appeared to be Mylon Jerath. So clearly we can't be Mylon Jerath because one of us looks like Mylon Jerath, and it worked.
Yeah, you eventually convinced him that you were not Mylon Jerath.
Yeah.
and that you were, in fact, your good friend.
The PCs. Eutropia's agents.
Eutropia's agents. So, at that point, the PCs made it to the undead. The undead were sort of members of the Cult of the Dawnflower who were stuck down there, and the PCs gave them back their scimitar, which caused them to instantly return to death. And then they took the scimitar again.
Mm-hmm. Well, they didn't need it anymore.
They didn't need it anymore. So at that point, that the PCs had taken the scimitar back, they found that the body of Te Amelon was like preserved and wrapped up and was sort of just clearly had the tip of the dagger that would have matched with the rest of the dagger inside of her body, and that basically they realized it was Mylon Jarroth's like sort of contingency plan in case she needed to turn on. Yes, because why else would she have a
pocket that had? We're like, why is her perfectly preserved body here with the murder weapon still in here and her ID papers in her pocket?
Yep.
I see.
Yep. At first they were like, "Oh, that's really convenient," but this isn't even where she died because the Kadir and the oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they realized it was Jarroth's contingency plan. Of course, the main plan out of the Immaculate Circle, which they didn't know, is that Jarroth, and I think never really knew because the Immaculate Circle weren't exactly advertising this, was that after Pytharis took care of Eutropia, they were 100% gonna just go after Pytharis no matter what, using this damning evidence to get rid of him. So then there'd be nobody left except for Carius. That's something that, like, they didn't necessarily advertise. They kind of knew the PCs didn't like Jarroth, and Jarroth had supported Pytharis and his family for generations, so we're just more of like, Jarroth liked Pytharis and stuff.
Yeah. And we weren't too suspicious of that now because we figured, Jarroth is the spy master person. Of course he wants some kind of backup.
And he'd worked for Pytharis for a while. Of course, someone like Jarroth would have a contingency plan against Pytharis just in case.
Yeah.
It just makes sense. It's good spycraft.
Yes.
All right. So, at that point in time, they had finished off Watercrest.
So is that when we got a message from her as well? Because I know that we got a message from her spirit that we recorded in this little centipede
when you combined the dagger, you were able to record it in your Clockwork Spy beetle.
Oh, right, it's beetle. That's what it was.
When her spirit appeared and started telling the truth about what happened. You also spirited out her now grown-up children out of this city in case Pytharis came after them.
Was that actually a thing in the AP that he may have come after her children? Or we just thought that maybe we should...
I don't think he actually was going to come after them, but it did mention them, and you told them the truth about what happened. And they are mentioned. The fact that Eustace insisted that they leave the city is not necessarily a thing. Let's see. I think it's in Waterhill Manor where it talks about what happens with Te Amelon.
The life and death of Te Amelon's sidebar?
Yes. That could be it. Yeah, their children still live. Both Aromatis and Quinn live in the city and work as tutors in the Skulls district. They know their mother disappeared when they were young. So, yeah, I basically just created personalities for those tutors that the PCs dealt with, and they spirited them out of the city just in case. All right. So at this point, the PCs were ready to go after Pytharis himself. They had enough evidence that the Lion Blades were convinced that there were some serious issues here. But Abadar's pillar, like I mentioned before, was very, very well defended because of the constant amount that Kadirans had tried to get in there. Mundane disguises seemed to the PCs like the only thing that could work. Because all sorts of magic were being blocked off.
So we wanted to have armor and uniform that was fitting for the guards that would normally be about this place.
Yep. So
what better way to get that armor than from the guards who are usually in this place?
But they're usually in this place. Fortunately, they all left duty to leave to go to the town on shifts. Unfortunately, that was together. So Carla managed to take out a shift worth of guards by going on dates with all of them. Because she wanted to use all of her abilities of Felena, which include dressing fabulously. She dressed differently for each of the dates, just in case. And then using charm, charmed them and took them on dates, and then sort of incapacitated them and took their stuff until all the PCs could be disguised as guards. Now, the PCs were more than one of the full patrols worth of guards, so they basically took out 2 patrols worth so that they could handle this. And then, because they were in groups of 3, so they had 2 groups of 3, and then I think one of the PCs was turned into a bat with Cloak of the Bat.
Also not
and hiding.
Also like I think
because
we didn't get,
normally turning into a bat you would get caught, but it was hiding like under the armor of the guard or something like that.
Yeah. And she wasn't able to get all of them because not all of the guards were like single and attracted to women. We got a good number of them.
She got them all, even though not all the guards were single and attracted to women, because she used charm.
Right,
she used charm if they didn't normally want to go on a date with her, to just go out for drinks and talk about stuff.
Yeah, that's what it was. Because I know that was a thing. It's like,
that's
they're
right.
not all going to be attracted to you.
That's right. Yeah. I rolled randomly, and one of them was in a relationship, and one of them was a gay man, and the other 4 were she got to go out on dates with her.
Yeah, I think there was this. Yeah.
I think that's what happened.
Yeah.
So anyway, they had these outfits, and the reason she went on dates with them instead of just ganking them immediately is that she asked them questions about themselves, even if it wasn't a date, just a drinking time, that were a combination of like just, oh, tell me more about yourself, but also just like some really random obscure facts that way they would know if they needed to pretend to be these people.
Oh yeah, so like how are things going with your family life? So that then when we were pretending to be those people, we could like have information we could use to be less suspicious.
So the PCs, since they were 2 separate patrols that come in one after the other, needed to send one group in first, one group in second. They wanted to send someone who was good at disguises and deception in with both groups so that they could both be following the expert. And they wanted to send the group that had John and other people who were just completely incompetent in second, because the one that went in first had to be better overall, so it could withstand being there and being at a post for a while without getting caught. Everything would have gone perfectly for their plan, except for one little thing, which is that it turns out the PCs being known to be there from the beginning meant that the divinations went into the fort had been keyed specifically to them, so as soon as any of them entered, Dame Avenna knew that a PC had entered. So they started to put the fort on high alert. There's a PC in here. They were checking around in different areas with patrols. They checked the guards who'd come in recently just in case. And when they said to those guards the PCs who were the PCs, and the PCs had very effectively disguised, and they're like, we know it's not this, but we're going to have them check you just in case. And they were like, crap. So they had a telepathic bond going, and they quickly used the telepathic bond to figure out what they were going to do. And
at that point, they were also like going to raise the drawbridge so no one else could come in.
So they had the other group coming quickly because they almost made it all the way to when the next group had to come in. And this is actually something we talked about a little bit in Pathfinder Second Edition and the info and the anatomy of a heist. There's a whole episode about this session that you may have already seen. But before I keep going, I haven't seen any chats in a while, and there's been some weird buffering on my stream. So just somebody send anything to make sure that this is still actually happening and not just pretending to us that it's happening. I just want to make sure, because the stream was buffering a lot and I had to refresh it. Let's see. Anyone?
Is the stream still working?
Maybe it isn't. But it says it is.
It looks like it is on this end.
Looks like it is here too. The stream manager says it's going, and it has bitrate. Everyone, let me try to send a message. I've sent a message that said hello. Linda sent one that said cast.
This is odd.
This is very odd. Or everyone's playing a joke on us and they're all watching. Or they're all like, no, somebody else is going to send the message. I don't need to send the message.
Don't be victim to the bystander effect. If you are here, please say something.
That's right.
If we don't see anything in the next minute or two, we should probably cut the stream short here.
Hold on. I'm going to give 1 XP to everyone. I got the XP too.
Yeah.
Oh, considering Warlock's here, so at least someone is here. I think people are here. They just were being quiet, and then I got suspicious because of the fact that we were buffering so much on my Twitch.
Okay, so the stream is still working. People were just listening.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you, Kitsune.
All right, let's keep going then. So, as you may know if you watched Anatomy of a Heist, the next thing that happened was they scrambled. Yeah, everyone was just dealing with things. They scrambled and scrambled and scrambled for some idea of what to do, and eventually they decided that Eustace used Conceal Spell to fireball the stables right when they were about to have to go in to be checked. This immediately caused a huge amount of panic, everyone rushing around. Then, while everyone watched the fireballing stables at that same moment without Conceal Spell, but with the fact that there was a giant fireball exploding the stables, Carla made an illusory scene of the PCs, not the ones who are disguised as the guards, but like the actual PCs, not in disguise, running in towards the barracks where the sleeping guards were, with fire dancing on Eustace's fingers. So this sort of, the guards are like, oh yeah, we knew the PCs had infiltrated somewhere. There they are, they're going to kill all of our people. So they went into the barracks. PCs, meanwhile, went into the place where they were supposed to be checked by the diviner. Where they found that the diviner was there, as well as these random nobles and some guards, and like one of those Abadar priests from the like really jerk Abadar priest sect.
And then we're all like, the PCs are, it's like Eutropia's agents are attacking.
So they were saying that, but then also Eustace decided to, on a gamble, use MindLink to send 10 minutes worth of information to the diviner. Because he knew that maybe she would be willing to listen to the PCs, and they used diplomacy to actually convince her to sort of stand down.
But the Eutropia's agents are attacking out loud stuff was for the benefit of the guards that were there.
That's right. But when they convinced her to stand down, the guards were like, wait a minute. And she's like, no, there's no need to attack. But the two nobles were like in a huff because of the fact that their little sister Estella had been killed by the PCs. So they started getting into the fight with the PCs. The PCs managed to take out these nobles who were actually divs like Estella, by which I mean Night Hags. They're the other two members of the Coven, the Sisters of Indulgent Dreams, and the cleric of Abadar and the guards. And at that point, T disguised as one of those Night Hags and took her token that allows certain of the defenses in the fort to not affect her. And the rest of the PCs were talking to Avenna for a little bit, at which point they decided to follow Avenna up to her tower and then disintegrate the wall that was sort of in the stairwell of her tower at the top floor. So when they did that, it led them from H37, which I think H37, which is like the hallway right outside of Avenna's room, Wizard's Antechamber, into H36, the treasure vault, which has a unique brass golem that defends the treasure, which they ran through not fighting the brass golem. taking them into H-35, the war room, where Pytharius normally would be. So this would almost be that their second battle was in the room that was the final room with Pytharius, except Pytharius had leapt out of the window to save his horse that was in the stables that Eustace had burned, while they were inside dealing with the other situation with that was in the room where they were going to be checked with divinations.
Yes.
So then the PCs all leapt out of the window into a verbal duel with Pytharius. And they got into this big verbal duel, and T, who was still disguised as one of Pytharius' allies, just kept using flattery to be like, she was disguised as a Lumia, because Magilla got away, and she was like, everyone saw that she was a Lumia who they knew was on their side. It's like, great, Pytharius, our side has been caught. They figured out everything, even the horrible murders and these other things. It's just, because you get extra edges or advantages when you reveal certain information about Pytharius, she would just let it slip.
She's like,
showing her
stop.
He's like, stop helping.
Stop helping.
Because she actually managed in some cases to deal like significant damage to him, despite flattery doing less damage but giving you more edges with flattery. And he was also weak to flattery, and so she actually dealt the finishing blow to him with flattery. Is like, where she was like something like, like common. It's like common criminals are those who are those who get caught, but someone with the noble lineage of a Pytharius who cares so much for the good of Taldor, like you would definitely knows that the thing that's best for the country right now would be for you to stand down and something like that, and just playing up on his ego. And she won the fight with flattery, and they got him to stand down, and so they defeated Maxilar Pytharius with a verbal duel. And at that point, they brought in Pytharius. They collected the stuff from his vault to take, and Pytharius was just warning them all and said, "You don't realize what you've done. I was the only one who's stopping this information from getting out. Now that I'm captured, it will, which is that the entire Stavian line are actually not just Stavians, because they changed their name when they were adopted.
They were originally Adela.
Adelas.
Dun, dun, dun.
Which, if you know anything from the Tomb of the Iron Medusa, the last name Adela is like having the last name Hitler in Taldor. They're like super evil, super ridiculously over the top in terms of their excesses and the evil stuff that they've done throughout Taldor, and everyone hates them.
Yes.
But one of them, one of the few surviving members, was adopted into the Stavian family, and that adopted member wound up becoming the Emperor, as it turned out, just due to a whole bunch of chance. But most people didn't remember that they were still in Adela. But when this news got out, well, remember how few factions were vying for the War for the Crown at the beginning of Part 4? Splintered everything, because whether or not the Stavians should have even been on the throne was called into question at that point, even though they did convince Pytharius to go into retirement / exile for the good of the nation. And
we also found a rather interesting person who was there with Pytharius, who we had previously thought was dead, but was not.
That's right. Stavian III was in the tower. So the PCs found Stavian III, and he was just ranting and raving and kept asking them to give him back his spellbook, which they continued to refuse. And because they were like, Eustace was like, do we have enough Phantom Steeds for everybody to bring everybody back? And Stavian's like, I can prepare Phantom Steed.
Just give me my spellbook.
Give me my spellbook. And they're like, no.
So but we did still manage to take him back.
They took him back, and they managed to take him back to Marat, and they were heading to Lothidar through Stakis, the town with all the peasants that they had been helped out. And so, like, one of the peasants came up to say hello to everyone, and was like, Lord Eustace, you've returned. And then Stavian's like, filthy peasant, get away from me. The peasant's like, who are you? He's like, I am Stavian III, and you are a filthy peasant, and your stench insults me. And then the peasant was like, and then they're like, ah! They started laughing. It's like, this is great. You have a Stavian impersonator, and it sounds exactly like him. I'm not a Stavian impersonator. I'm the real Stavian. They're like, Eustace, your new jester is the greatest.
Stavian was not pleased.
He was very angry.
Yep.
It's like, this is exactly what Stavian would have said.
It was exactly what Stavian would have said.
And then they reunited Stavian with Eutropia, who now she had to deal with the fact that her father, who had regressed into his hereditary dementia's final stages, was still alive. And
he got to join Bartleby in the Wizards in House Arrest.
Wizards in House Arrest.
Captivity.
Whereas Pathfinder went in exile to Absalom. But that's right. And at that point, also, turns out that Jera had escaped, but not before, just out of spite, sending his butler, disguised as Quingle, instead of a halfling, to try to murder Frogry's sister, which failed, but because there were too many precautions in the armory. But then Frogry's sister thought that Frogry sent her cleric of Desna, a friend, to murder her.
Yeah, so...
and thought that Frogry had made up fake evidence against Pytharius and tried to blackmail him and get rid of him.
So Frogry's sister still thinks that Frogry tried to have her murdered.
Yep.
Family relationships are tough. When you're on opposite sides of a civil war and if Rakshasa decides to try to tear you apart.
Meanwhile, Milo and Jareth returned to the Immaculate Circle. They were displeased by the fact that he utterly failed at everything, and they were beginning to suspect he was just a Rakshasa who claimed to have balanced his internal alchemies to become immortal, and that does not count as an exploit if you were just a Rakshasa. So they kicked him out of the 5th slot in the Immaculate Circle.
Which meant they had an opening.
Yes, they had an opening. So at that point, is when Nenarine Adela, also an Adela, does not advertise her Adela, came to visit Niv. And she was one of the members of the Inner Circle, and say that there was an opening in the Inner Circle, and that she was interested in seeing Niv fulfill that opening at some point. So she shared all of her research, all of her blood research with Niv, that only works for her because of her unique half-elf biology, and that is not even close to working for anyone else, and told Niv that if he did some minor tweaks on this, that he might be able to find something, and she gave him also some early Philosopher's Stone type stuff that she hadn't quite gotten into, and he combined that with some of his research from Vadrigan Pole, from the Mouse Person, and several other things that they had obtained. For instance, the Heartstone from the Night Hag was part of his thing. He knew that he might need some astral essence from a powerful legend from the astral plane, and some other things that were to sustain himself. But he wanted to create basically a new sort of immortal circulatory system and heart for himself that would keep him alive forever. And that way, he would be able to join the Immaculate Circle. So he was still working on that with his good friend Nenarine Adela. She seemed pretty convinced that her research that only worked on her would still be helpful to him. And he would continue to do that as we move into part 5.
Yes.
So for before we go to part 5, I think we should stop for today. But
sounds good to me.
Part 5 will be the next episode, and that one, a lot of things happened, so that might take a lot of the next episode.
All right, so let's say goodbye to YouTube.
Yeah, that's right, and then we can say a little bit more to Twitch. So, bye YouTube, see you next time.
Bye.